everyone. So I kind of just want to talk to you guys a little bit about what God has given me, kind of, like gift-wise. And I really like that song just right at the end when it says, no gift is too small. And that actually goes right along with what I was wanting to talk about, because recently, a couple weeks ago, I got back from competing for Miss Nebraska, which was an amazing experience. It was incredible. But, I didn't just go there for a week to wake up every day, have a busy day, learn dances, practice and rehearse, and compete. There was so much more to it. And I realized that the first day when I arrived at my host family. I arrived at my host family and I immediately felt like God was with me the whole time when I was in that house. And I never really thought about much of it. I was just like, wow, I just feel like this presence is with me. And then it was actually 3 days before I competed in talent. And I was practicing my song, and my host mom comes up to me, and she's like, something's missing. And I was like, well, what do you mean? What's missing? And she's like, what do you feel when you're singing this song? And I'm like, well, I'm singing an Italian song. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what it means. I don't know. And I just kind of didn't really think about it. And then I took a step back, and I looked at my platform, my personal platform, which is overcoming adversity in order to be your best. And I thought about it, and I was like, the way that I am singing this song and the words, some of the words that I do know about it kind of stuck out to me, and it was kind of about overcoming a struggle. And so I didn't even realize it until 3 days before I was about ready to compete at Miss Nebraska, that this song had so much more meaning to me than I thought. And so with my host mom, we sat down for about 3 hours, and we went through the stages of my song and how it starts out with me asking myself why. And that's kind of how the song was, and that's how I presented it on stage, is asking myself why. Why are we handed struggles in life? And then the next stage is me saying, no, I'm not going to get taken down. I'm not going to get taken down by my struggles that are handed to me. And so there's one part of the song where I put my hand up and I'm like, here, God, like, I'm giving my life to you. Like, this problem is not gonna take over. And then I move on to the next part of my song, and it just kind of grows and it builds. And it was really kind of an emotional step for me. And my host mom was like, that was what was missing. You weren't taking that step into your song and having it mean something to you. And so that was like huge for me. And the way that God worked to help me realize that, it made me that much more confident to compete on stage. And so when I did compete and when I did do my talent, I felt 100% confident. I felt like God helped me get to where I needed to be in order to sing that song. And so it was really cool because my host family, Christ, he's so big in their lives. And it was a random pick. Your host family is random. You just get paired up with someone. And the fact that I got them was a huge gift from God. And I could feel his presence the whole week I was at Miss Nebraska. I wasn't competing for the prettiest gown. I loved my gown. But if I didn't get the best gown award, that wasn't going to make or break me, because I knew that I had Christ in my life that whole week, and I had him helping me through each day of competition. And so I just really, walking away from Miss Nebraska, even though I didn't win, 15 of us didn't win, but I think I won in the aspect that I grew as a person, and that he definitely worked through me in different ways in helping me find people that are going to make me better and open doors and opportunities for me. And so it's kind of cool that, his gift, no gift is too small. Even that small, me recognizing about my song, it helped me become that much more confident. And so I just think it's amazing that, how he works in our lives. And also, Mel kind of touched on this, but one of my really good friends was in a car accident, and she's such a strong girl. I remember in track, she was breaking records left and right for the 400. And she has her name up on the board for the 400 record. And she was on our 4x4 team. And it's amazing, She's such a good runner. And when I heard about it, I was like, no, that, it can't be possible. Like, she can't be hurt. I just didn't think it was even possible. to think about. And so it was really hard for me to kind of comprehend that. And so actually it was the day after she got in her accident, I was on a run, and I couldn't stop thinking about faith. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on this run and I get to run, but what if she can't ever run again? And I just kept thinking about that. I'm like, I have to do something. And so I ran to the chiropractic office and I was like, Crystal, I'm doing a 5K. I need to give faith to Faith. She needs that. She needs that with her to help her get through this. And it was amazing. The people support immediately. There's already close to 80 people coming to this 5K. And it's just incredible how God's working in this way, and how, he's going through the community. And it's not about the money. It's about the love and support and the prayers, because that family is going through so much right now, and the smallest things are helping her. And, getting the news yesterday that she's doing better and better, she's sitting up, she's communicating, she's probably going to get released here in about a week and a half, is what I've heard last. And that just the little like prayers or anything, it goes a really long way. And so I just think that's amazing how God works in people's lives. And I'm really blessed to be a part of such an amazing group, whether it's Miss Nebraska or whether it's one of my best friends. And I just think that God, he works in incredible ways, big or small. So, thank you.
That's great. I don't know about you guys, but I have so appreciated having Shaniah in our church the last few years. And I remember when she was like 13, I don't know if some of you were here, she came up and she gave a testimony on the stage that day about how she wanted to come here. And we surrounded her and we prayed that God would bless her and bring her to us. And he did. I think she was a gift to us. And I just really, really appreciate your life. And I know it's not always been easy for you, but you've remained faithful, and that's amazing. What God can use. I Googled this and found out that there are 17.5 billion people living in this world right now. There are 2.3 billion people that claim to be Christian. That means there's at least 5.2 billion people who don't know the Savior. They don't know that he made a way for us to be in the presence of God. But the amazing thing to me is, we know the scriptures say God's biggest desire is to draw all men to him. And so how's he going to draw right now in 2017, and that's not even counting the people in the past or the people in the future? How is he going to draw those people to him? What method did he choose? And I know there's a lot of ways, but the primary way that God chose to bring people to him is through us. What do we have? Not much. If this whole room, if we all got together and sat down and said, well, I'm good at this, and I can do this, and I can do this, and we measured our gifts, and in our own strength, if we tried to invest those into the service of God, how far would it get? Not very far. It still wouldn't be enough. It's only what we have when we give it to God and put it in his hands, then it can become a miracle. I did a lot of, I'm really new to talking like this, and so I did a lot of studying this week, and so if I'm all over the place, please forgive me. But I was reading stories in the Bible. How many of you like the stories in the Bible? Some of them are really good. I mean, I like Bible stories. When I was a kid, we had a Bible story book, and I liked reading the stories of the Bible. Not all of them, but I liked reading them. And they're full of great stories. And so today we're going to look at several stories in the Bible of people that gave what they had to God, and we're going to look at some people who tried to withhold from God. And the primary story that we're going to use is found in John chapter 6, 1 through 14. It's a story about a Savior who can do anything. It's a story about disciples who have chosen to follow Christ, but at this point, they don't really yet believe that Christ can satisfy great needs without having great resources. And it's about a boy who represents all who give what they have and give without reservation. And even though it appears insufficient and insignificant in our hands, placed in Jesus' hands, we know that it becomes much. And I'm not going to read the Bible story to you because the lady sang it beautifully about the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes and how the boy maybe thought that that was so small and insignificant. But I did a little bit of study and looked up something that might have been similar to what the boy had. And according to Stormy, if you'd put that slide up, it might have looked a little bit like this. Very small, flat loaves of bread, and actually these fish might be bigger because one of the things that I read actually said they're probably more like a small dried fish, like maybe a sardine or something like that. So we're talking about a very small lunch. But that lunch had to feed, go to the next picture, go to something like that. Okay. How many, really, wouldn't you have been embarrassed? I mean, really? Jesus is trying to feed this, and you've got those little loaves, flat loaves, and those little fishes. I think it would have been pretty embarrassing to do something in the face of the request of feeding a crowd like this. And the disciples were focused on the resources, how much it would take. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew what he was going to do. The Bible says it. He already knew how he was going to do it. But he asked Philip because Philip is focusing on the amount. And Jesus says, Philip, why don't you go to town and buy some to feed these people? You're kidding, right? I mean, Philip was probably like, it could take all the disciples, we could work almost all year and collect wages all year, and we still wouldn't be able to buy enough food to feed all the people that are here. It was a test. I want to tell another story, and this story is found in the first few chapters of Exodus, and it's about another boy. You guys know who it is? He grew up in a palace as the son of an Egyptian princess. You know what? He had education, he had wealth, he probably had a certain sphere of influence. Now, in our day and age, are those important things when we measure the qualities of leadership? Wealth, power, influence, those are all important to us. If you have those things, you're probably going to be successful. You may have a great way of life. You're going to have all this stuff. So why didn't God use him right then? But he didn't. We know that this person then got himself into trouble, and he had to run away. And he finds himself in the wilderness, and he builds a new life for himself. But it's the life of a shepherd. His wealth, his power, his influence, that is all gone. And then something happens in chapter 3, verses 1 through 17. He encounters a burning bush and a meeting with the Almighty. Moses was afraid. And what did God say to him? What do you hold in your hand? All that other stuff is gone. But God said, what do you hold in your hand now? And Moses said, if you'd go to the next slide, well, it's a rod. It's a staff. I use it to shepherd things. And God's response to him was, throw it down. And you know what? God used that rod several times when Moses was dealing with the Pharaoh and trying to convince him to let the Israelites go. And God used that rod several times while Moses was leading the Israelites through the wilderness. What do you hold in your hand? Maybe it's not great. Maybe it's not the mighty things that the world sets such a store in. Maybe it's something very small. And like Shaniah shared and the song shared, but when it's small, when we bring it, it's enough because we bring it to Christ. And then it's no longer ours. Once we bring it to Christ, then it becomes his. And no matter how small the gift may seem, he does accept that. It becomes his, and he is glad that we gave it. And once he accepts it, he's going to bless it. And we need to remember that he loves us not for what we are, but what he's going to make us. And I think we also need to remember that he blesses our offerings not because of what they're worth, not because there's some great thing that we've given to him, but he blesses it because his power is going to make it worthy of his praise. And not only will he bless them, he increases them. So give your all. Don't withhold thinking that you can keep some of this back for yourself. Withholding can be dangerous business. And I want you to think about your own stories. If you've read Bible stories, think about people in the Bible who withheld. And how did that work out for them? And I've got two examples that I want to share with you, one from the Old and one from the New. The first one is a man named Achan. And that Bible story is found in Joshua 6 and 7. And I don't know if you remember the story, but Joshua has led the Israelites. They marched around the walls of Jericho. They defeated Jericho. But there was one stipulation that God placed on them. They were to destroy everything. Now, back then when they had wars, that was kind of the glory of the war, is that you could defeat somebody and then you could take all their stuff, and then it became your stuff. But God said, no, it all has to be destroyed. Well, Achan just thought, well, I'm just going to keep a little bit for myself. I'll just keep this little bit, and I will just have it, and nobody will need to know about it. And so he took this stuff. You guys know what happened? The Israelites went into battle again, and guess who did not go with them? God. And what happened to them? They lost. And Joshua came before God, and he's like, God, you said you were going to lead us and give us this land, and now you have abandoned us. Why? And God said, because there's sin here. And they did some searching and finding, and they found out that Achan had withheld some of these items, and didn't turn out so good for Achan or his family. If you read the rest of the story, that was one of those Bible stories I didn't like, because they were all killed because they tried to withhold. The second story is Ananias and Sapphira, and it's found in Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. And back then, the church was going great guns. It was new. And people were going around and they were selling their land or their items, and they were giving it to the church to use to further the cause of Christ. And that's a great thing. And Ananias and Sapphira had some property. And so they decided they were going to sell it and they were going to give it to the church. But then somewhere along the lines, they got to talking to each other. And they said, well, let's keep a little bit for ourselves. Now, maybe that's not such a bad thing, but when Ananias went to the disciple or the apostles and he gave them what he had, the money he had, the apostles asked him, is this everything? Guess what he did? He lied. What happened? God killed him right there. Then his wife, Sapphira, shows up and she tells the same story that he had told. And what happened to her? God killed her too. Withholding can be dangerous business. But there are also stories about those who gave it all, and those are the good stories. And I know there's many stories. You guys might even remember Bible stories of your own, but I want to look at a story in 1 Kings 17, 1 through 6. And it's a story about Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of God, and he was in trouble with the king, and so he had to flee Israel. And so he went into this foreign land, but this foreign land had been hit by a severe famine. But God sent him, and he said, I'm going to send a widow, and she's going to take care of you. And so Elijah was sitting there waiting, and pretty soon this lady came out, and she was gathering some sticks. And Elijah said to her, he said, would you give me some water and a piece of bread? And the lady said, sir, I'm out here gathering sticks because I'm going to make a fire, and I have only a handful of flour and just a little bit of oil, and I'm going to make one little loaf of bread, and my son and I are going to eat it, and then we're going to prepare to die because there's nothing else. And Elijah said, don't be afraid. And you know what she did? She took those sticks, she made a fire, she made a loaf of bread, and before she and her son ate, they gave that loaf of bread to Elijah. What happened? Somebody tell me what happened. They never went hungry. The flour never ran out and the oil never ran dry. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And she invited Elijah to stay with them, and so she benefited because she had a continuous supply of food. And then later on, her son did die, and Elijah brought him back to life, but she gave it all. The second story is in the New Testament, and it's one of my favorite stories, and it's about Mary, and it's found in Matthew 26, 6 through 13, Mark 14, 3 through 9, John 12, 1 through 11. There's another story that's in Luke chapter 7, 36 through 50. We don't know if it's the same woman. There's kind of a debate about whether or not it's the same woman. But the first three accounts in Matthew, Mark, and John, that is the Mary that we know that belongs to Martha and Lazarus. And if you remember, Mary loves Jesus. She loves Jesus so much. And she wanted to show her love for him and express her love for him. And so she brought a gift of a very expensive jar of perfume or some kind of anointing oil, and she came into the dinner and she broke the jar and she poured it on his head and on his feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the disciples, they weren't very happy. They said, well, that was expensive. That should have been sold and the money should have been given to us, to use for the furthering God's kingdom. And I really don't know what their hearts were. I kind of think maybe their hearts were a little bit, they just wanted that money in their own treasury. But do you know what happened there? God rebuked the disciples, and he blessed her gift. And he said, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, it will be told of that Mary did this for her Lord. And it has been. And here we are telling this story again today. And it probably will be told in other places beyond this place. What we don't give will be taken away from us, and maybe even then some. What is given to God is rewarded, and it's used for greater things. If Stormy would put the next sign up there, this is a mathematical sign. What is it? A sign of? Multiplication. We love multiplication in the church. Boy, you hear a lot about it, church growth. We got to do all these things, get all these people in the door. And so we're always trying to increase. Go to the next sign. What is this a sign of? Division. Jesus also supported division. We give our gifts to him, and they become his. They're blessed by him, and they're increased by him. But why does he increase them? He increases them so that they can be used by him. I don't think Jesus believed in multiplication unless it was followed by division, that we are giving things away. So answer me this. This is a question I have to ask myself too. If we give what we have to Christ, truly surrender it to him, is there a limit? Back to the story about the boy and the loaves, there are some things that happened after he gave his lunch. The first thing that happened was that people were helped. There was a situation where the crowd was hungry, and the boy gave what he had, and people were filled. They got all they wanted to eat. So the things for us to think about then is, what's your gift? What's mine? And if we give it, will God use it to bring people to him? The second thing that happened was that Jesus was glorified. The people there, they said, oh, he's a prophet. He's a great prophet of God. There were some people that wanted to take him and make him their king. Now, maybe it wasn't for the right reason. Maybe they just liked all the stuff that Jesus was doing. But the key point is here, they did recognize his power. If we give our gifts to Christ and he uses them, will it help others to recognize the power of Christ? Will it lead others to glorify him? The third thing that happened is when the meal was finished, there were a lot of leftovers to be gathered up. There's a lot more than what the meal was even started with. If you remember the story, there were 12 baskets full. Each disciple had to go gather up what was left. When we give our little bit, can it grow into more? If so, will we have more to serve him with the next time? The more you use your gift, the more you give it, the more there is of it if we give it to Christ first. The story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes recorded in the Bible is the only one of Christ's miracles to make it into all 4 Gospels. It's a remembered story. It's something that we do remember. And when we give our gifts to God, it will be remembered, even the little things. And I wanted to share, last week I was so touched. We had the time of sharing about fathers and men in the church, and I really appreciated all of the things that people shared. But I know Myra, she came out and she just shared a story about Gary's dad, Dwayne, and how when Myra was a little girl, Dwayne would invite her to come over and spend Sunday afternoons with his family, and how that meant a lot to her. That's a small thing, but she remembered it. And I always remember how, not everybody here, but how many of you remember Daryl Johnson? Daryl Johnson, I always thought was kind of the heart of the church, And anytime anything was tough or things were going just a little bit skilter or off, I always remember Daryl saying, it'll be okay. How many of you remember that? It'll be okay, And those are little things that even now, it still rings in my head, And like even right now, we're kind of going through a little bit of a trying time with losing a pastor and, the frustration that comes with starting the search all over. And every once in a while, I just hear Daryl in my head saying, it'll be okay. Which is hard for me because if you know me, I'm kind of a pessimist anyway. But I remember that. Little things. And I want to share a little thing that happened, and I asked her mother's permission. Would you show the next slide? That happened this week. This is McKaylee Campbell sitting in the middle, and Shaniah shared a little bit about Faith being involved in an accident last week. And McKaylee's mom is the volleyball coach. And she said that Wednesday night, she and McKaylee were sitting there talking about Faith. And McKaylee said, Mom, I want to do something to help Faith and her family. And Kim said, I said, well, McKaylee, what do you want to do? How do you think you can help? And she said, I want to have a lemonade stand, and I want to make a whole lot of money, like $20, to help Faith. Kim said she far out exceeded the $20, so that's good. But this little girl with a big heart wanted to do something to help somebody. And so Thursday, she sat up her little lemonade stand down here at Larry and Danita's house, and I've been working on this idea of what God can use and the little boy and his fishes, and this story just touched my heart. If you're young, give something to God. If you're old, give something to God. If you're new to your faith, give something to God. If you've trusted him for a long time, give something to God. Don't excuse yourself. Don't be like like I would have been with that little boy with the little basket and saying, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm not going to offer this. This is ridiculous. Don't excuse yourself. Trust God's providence. Jesus knew what he was going to do. God brought that little boy to that place at the right time for such a time as this. And Jesus brought that gift into notice. The disciples were just running around thinking, where are we going to get the resources to do this? And Jesus sent them out. Go look for food. And Andrew found this little boy in his lunch. And it wasn't until Moses lost it all that God decided to ask him, what's in your hand? Elijah told the widow, don't fear. And she didn't. And Jesus acknowledged the beautiful gesture that Mary did for him. We need to give our gifts to God. We need to let him know that they are his to use. They belong to Christ. Christ, who spoke the world into being. Don't you think he would be able to speak greatness into whatever we give him? And finally, the last thing, which is sometimes the hardest. The little boy appears to have been willing to part with his lunch. Are we willing to part with what we have to give it to God? Are you? Am I? I don't know. It's something that we need to think about. And I'm going to go ahead and have the musicians and Bill come on up. I want to close with a story about Moses. We talked a little bit about him. When my sister went to Bible college at Gulf Coast, she traveled with the choir. And they were on tour one year, and I remember this song, and it was all about Moses, and it was kind of this fast-driven, and about the rod, and confronting God, and the rod becoming a snake, and it was just a great song, and it went on. But what really stuck with me is the last phrase that became very contemplative, and I just want to share that phrase as we get ready to close this time. What do you hold in your hand today? To what or to whom are you bound? Are you willing to give it to God right now? Lift it up, let it go, throw it down.